All right. Thanks everyone for joining me. Hey, this is the basics of digital painting. I'm Pete Morbacher. Every week I get out here and I give you guys an assignment and then I look over the previous week's assignment. I was actually just putting together a whole bunch of new assignments because I'm gonna make a big pack of these that I can give away so people can just do them on their own time instead of waiting for me every week. Still want to run the class, but I want to be able to make something that people can do self-directed. Yeah, this is actually what my face looks like. It's kind of shocking, I know. So I've got a few people already lined up here. If you see your art and your comment up on the screen, feel free to raise your hand. I can pull you up on stage. If you don't want to or can't be on stage, that's fine too. I'll give you a crit and we're going to move on. The first one we got up today is Marcos. Marcos, you here? I'm looking through all the avatars. I don't see Marcos. Oh, Marcos is here. Hey. I think you said it was your first time. First
I
time
am.
homework here,
I am here. Yeah,
Marcos?
first time.
Oops, sorry, my
I knew of
audio's
the
off.
class like for a month ago,
Yeah?
but I couldn't. I had something else on Thursdays afternoon, so I couldn't attend the class. But I've been like lurking around the server lately.
Okay, great.
Uh,
Well, nice to meet you.
that's great. Thank you. It's really nice to meet you too. Thank you very much for the class and for this. Is like you're. I'm a fan of your work.
Oh, thank
So
you. So,
it's
what was your experience with the assignment like this week?
oh, it's been a while since I did any landscape in like some months, so it was a bit hard, I think.
Uh huh.
Uh, I, as I said, I placed the commander. Like I had some trouble with giving it more depth and with the texture of the rocks.
Yes.
Also, the I had problems differencing between what was like the reflected light and the other like lighter texture on the rock.
Yep.
Um, I got confused with those a bit, uh, but it was great doing it.
Good.
Happy to be doing landscapes again.
So, for anybody who's watching on the VOD, the assignment for this week was that I gave out this reference image of these rocks. But one of the things you might notice is that the reference image is portrait format. And the assignment was to turn it into a 16 by 9 landscape, which means that you can't just stretch it out. You've got to like imagine what's happening outside the frame and recompose the composition in addition to the stuff you're talking about, the challenging process of just doing the study in the first place. And the big trouble, one of the big, most challenging parts of this is that there is some of the streaks and lines are cracks in the rocks. Some of them are streaks on the rocks themselves. So some of the darker parts are darker rocks, while other parts are shadows. And trying to make it so that it reads well to a viewer is a challenge. It's really difficult to like because if these were all just a flat color, then we'd only need to be solving the problem of what like where is it being lit from. But because we have a pattern on top of it also being unevenly lit, then we have to like kind of merge these two patterns, the texture of the rock and then also the colors of the rock, right? Marcos is now muted. Okay, so
Sorry,
oh, it's no
I'm back.
problem. I uh, I think you did actually a pretty good job with it. The looking at the image in the thumbnail, I'm usually checking things out to make sure they read here in the navigator more than anything else because I find that when you zoom in really close, it is hard for our brain to distinguish the difference between something that's a crack versus a stain. That the we were looking at these as just like little fine edges. They're all little lines when you abstract them far enough, and we can abstract them by zooming in really close. But the impression of whether or not the rocks feel right often comes down to what they look like from far away. And I think you captured that quite nicely. One of the major features of this image is that you get a lot of bounce light from underneath. The really bright desert sun here is bouncing off these light colored rocks in the ground and illuminating the underside of the whole shadow arch area. And that's giving off this really warm orange glow onto the lighter parts of the rocks. And you've captured the color of it quite nicely. And you've treated like the pattern of the texture of the, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out ways of separating my language out here so I'm being precise. The staining on the rocks you've treated differently than the cracks. It seems like you're either using a different brush or you're using the brush differently to try to like separate them out and treat them differently so that they read differently, which is about the most you can do, I think. I think that your approach to this is really strong, but it's one of those things where I think I was doing this study this week as well, and in my experience, I found that it's possible to get all of the details in there given enough time. If you make a million little brushstrokes, you will eventually get every tiny dimple in the rock. You will get every little minor discoloration perfect. If you make a brushstroke for every pixel on the whole screen, eventually you'll get it. But what we're doing here is we're trying to simplify things and break it down. And so that is the eternal challenge when it comes to landscapes, I think. Because when we're doing portraiture, when we're doing people, we have a lot of shorthand for eyes, nose, mouth, hands, things like that. But when we need to stylize an environmental piece, the answers become a little less specific. And this is something that I have less experience in. So I was also finding the easiest way to do it, the easiest way to learn it, I think, is to start by doing it the most inefficient ways you can possibly make it happen. So going through with a tiny brush and manually putting in every single streak one at a time, painting in every little crack as an individual line, and layering them one on top. You could even go to the step of trying to put them on separate layers. Like you could do all of the cracks and all of the shadows and everything and have the color flat, and then paint on the streaks and the patterns as a separate layer, maybe with a blending mode, or maybe just being very careful about glazing it in over the top to add those color differences separately. And when you go through that process in a super manual way, and you make everything by hand, and you make so many tiny little brush strokes, and you do, 10 hours on it, then the next time you go to do something like that, you have a much clearer understanding. You have an intuition about where you can go, where you can cut corners, what's really going to make a big difference as far as how the appearance of it looks. There's always a lot of talk about speed paints. I don't know how much it is around the culture these days, but when I was first coming up, there was a lot of talk about 20 minutes, no ref. People trying to speed paint everything. People always trying to push the efficiency. I think the first step towards efficiency is inefficiency. And then through repetition, we discover the shortcuts in our own mind as to how we see these things and how we can break down the appearance of them in the most efficient way possible. So my recommendation to you is if you wanted to have an easier time with the things that you're struggling with, do more studies like this, but double or triple the amount of time that you spend on them. Not for the reason that you should be spending more time making art, but because I believe that's the most efficient path to making it go quicker. And
Yeah, thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense. I love the idea of taking like more time to working all the details.
yeah,
Uh,
if you want to be able to do something like this in 20
yeah,
minutes, then the first step is to spend 10 hours doing it. And
all right.
I think some people, they want to do quick studies back to back to back, hoping that their quality level is going to keep going up. But I always think it's better to aim for a quality level. And like the more you do it, like the lower the time goes down over time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much
Do you
for
have any specific questions for me I could answer?
Yeah, one last question would be how to convey like the sense of depth with the like the vegetation in the front and the rocks. It like for me it ends up looking flat, especially the bottom part of the image.
Mm-hmm.
That's the it looks like uh, in the image with all the people and the details, like it looks deeper.
Yeah. So I think that that's a very good question, and I'm happy to answer it. One of the things that I think we see in the reference image is some overlap, and so you see like in the very foreground here we have this layer that like of loose sand that as it got a
Yeah,
bit of a darker tone to it and a little bit
yeah,
more orange. It's a slightly different hue than the rock. And then at the edge of it, we have all these shrubs, and those shrubs overlap these patterns of the rock very clearly. So we see the rock cuts in the rock on the left side of the bush, and then they continue on the right side. We can see very clearly that it's an overlap because we can see it stopping and starting through the bush.
yes.
And so we have like a clear sense visually that there is a layer being obscured by something that is closer to us. And then when we look at your image here, we get that a little bit over here in the lower right-hand side, where I think that if you isolate your vision there, the sense of depth gets a little bit better. But then when we go over to the left side, we see less of this. We don't
Okay.
have you haven't found a place to put that kind of hill, that little hill of sand that creates the foreground inside the reference, because I mean
Yes.
you are, as per the assignment, trying to narrow the field of view to the 16:9 ratio. One of the things that I tend to do in situations like this is, here, let me do an example over the top here. I will, whenever I'm doing one of this to my painting, I will often chop it up and I will take a piece out like this and I will put it, if it's like there's a corner that's really important, instead of letting it get cropped off the bottom, I will chop it out and maybe place it in the corner like this. And so it's not where it actually is in the photo, but
Yeah.
the process of constructing a new composition gives me the opportunity to rearrange the elements. And so this gives another plane of depth for us to give a little bit more overlap between the foreground and the middle ground here.
Yep.
Typically, when I'm looking at perspective, there's a few different things you can do. One of them is atmospheric perspective, where you add a little bit of extra atmosphere between us and the viewer. Like, you know, if this were really far away, we would start to lose a little bit of contrast and get some blue in there. But that's not in the reference. It actually takes much more distance. In illustration, we tend to overuse this a little bit as a shorthand, but in
Yeah.
reality, it ends up taking a lot more distance to be able to make atmospheric perspective work. You can potentially fake that if you feel like you need a little bit of it. The other thing that tends to happen to create depth and perspective in a scene like this is signifiers of like vanishing lines. So if you had rock, like in the reference, the rocks in some cases here are going fairly straight. And so you don't get a ton of opportunities here to have these parallel lines show where the vanishing points are, but you do get it a little bit. So finding and exaggerating more cracks that are going to give us converging lines that crisscross to create a sense of perspective. Like in the reference, this rock back here, the left side of it is much lower than the right side. Like it has this
Mhm.
slope to it that's
Yes.
giving us a little bit of perspective. And in your adaptation of it, we lose that slope a little bit. It's much more level. And that is probably causing a little bit of that perception that it's not going quite as deep. If you're looking to get that feeling back, I would deviate from the reference in a way that exaggerates the sense of perspective, where you maybe, you know, drop one of these things and really like, you know, try to really push that sense of converging lines and slope,
Yeah.
and like that maybe this is these slopes are actually parallel to each other, but that one is higher than the other in our view due to the perspective. And then, maybe even grab what you have already and do a little transform on it. Let me just give an example here. So I'm just grabbing a patch out and then doing a little bit of transformation on it, which may or may not be following the reference and being realistic. But the important thing is that we capture the essence of what we're looking for here and not be perfectly realistic about all of it. So I think that those two things would help a lot to solve the problem you're talking about.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for the great question, and thanks for doing the assignment this week.
There will be a BOD of this, right?
What's that?
Sorry?
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
There will be a BOD for this one, right?
Yes, there will. Oh, and hey, Steve Sketches, thanks for the raid, man. Appreciate it. Steve Sketch is a great artist. I love that guy's stuff. We're not doing a ton on Twitch anymore, so I haven't seen him around. But hey, Steve Sketches, how's it going? All right, so we're gonna move on to the next one. Thanks, Marcos. Taking my time here. Let's see, Soprit. Soprit's usually here. Hey, and do you have a mic? I think, have you been on mic before? I forget. I'm so bad at remembering everybody's specifics. One sec. Okay. Soprit was saying, I feel like this came out slightly more stylized compared to what I usually do. Not really sure why. Maybe it's the hard edges, or maybe I'm just wrong. I don't know. Bringing him up now. And then
Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Good. I've also got your work in progress shots up here. How was your experience doing the assignment this week?
I'd say pretty comfortable. So I think that drawing landscapes is a little bit easier than painting people. So
maybe easier for you.
Well, yeah, I guess.
I've always had an easier time painting people than landscapes personally, but I always find them to be a very fun challenge. First off, I want to say there's some aspects about your painting that I like quite a bit. Oop, there's a preview to who we're doing next. You have a great sense of depth and focus in this. I really feel like there is this tunnel that we're looking down because we have all of these parallel lines. What am I not seeing? Oh, not my brush. So we have this hole in the middle that we're looking through, and then you have the lines of the rocks kind of running parallel here, and it's very inviting. It creates this shape that like zooms us down here. And because there's these interesting rock shapes back here, but they're only visible through this hole in the center, it makes us want to kind of explore down this hallway and see what's on the other side of it. And so it really feels like it draws us in. So compositionally, I feel like you're doing something very interesting here. Did you do that intentionally? What are your thoughts?
I tried to do this intentionally, but it didn't work as well on the left side. Yeah, the left side.
Yeah,
So,
on the left side, it's much more wide open.
I'm pretty happy with the right side, and the left one is like, it's fine.
My solution to this when I'm doing imaginative painting is I always feel like the sky is like basically like a free spot where if you wanted to create concentric shapes, you can just draw in like a few wispy clouds that follow those same lines. So if you wanted to continue that same shape that was kind of zooming in towards the middle, even though there's no clouds in the reference, because this is kind of happening outside of it, if you needed another compositional element to help with that, you could absolutely use the sky as a space to be able to build on that. That's one of my thoughts. The other one is, I think you have opportunities to create more sort of background rocks over here outside the frame. Because again, we're dealing with rocks. They can be any shape. We can be fairly flexible with this. I think there is something a little bit odd about the balance of the composition here. One of the things I look at when it comes to compositional balance, when I think about balancing values, let me just decolorize the image really quick to show you. And then I'm going to exaggerate the values a little bit with a levels adjustment layer here. So I'm going to bring up the contrast. And we can see that there is this very specific spot of darkness over on this side here. And I'm just looking at this not as a cave anymore, not as a rock arch, but just as an abstract pattern of light and dark. The weight of this, I think about it like a seesaw. This is a very classic method of doing it. Like we have all of these elements sitting up here on a seesaw. And so this big dark area here is weighing down on this side of the seesaw. And it's very large, very heavy, and the weight is right here in the middle of this side of the seesaw. And so what we need is something that's going to balance against it on the other side of the seesaw. So we need something that, if using mechanical leverage, we could set something all the way over here on the end that doesn't need to be quite as heavy to balance these two sides. Am I making sense? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I never thought of this.
So I really like this sort of seesaw balance theory of composition. You can also build another seesaw that runs up the opposite side. Oop. With a fulcrum over here in the middle, and think about it and turn the whole thing 90 degrees and thinking about it that way as well. So what I would think about is how much darkness do I need to put on this side to be able to balance it out? So finding an excuse to put a dark shadow over here, maybe a cluster of very dark bushes, maybe another rock that is experiencing a lot of shadow, or, there's a darker shape up here could also balance it. It doesn't need to be resting across the bottom to balance these two elements. And so finding some way of justifying like a rock up here that maybe has a light side, and then there's a shadowed side and it's getting particularly dark, in that one part. Balancing out the composition in a purely abstract way in terms of values, I think would help this piece feel a little bit more natural. And you have a lot of opportunities to do that. You've got a little bit of that going already with this space over here. This wedge over here, I think, is looking pretty good. But I think it needs to get beefed up a little bit. And then, you are going to run into the issue of inventing lighting that's going to look natural. So it's a difficult challenge to figure out. I'm going to pull up the reference here a little bit. Yeah, I like the way that you have shown us the other side of the shadow and brought it light again, because having the whole side go dark like this would make it very difficult to balance the two. But personally, I think that we have this segment of sky up here, and I wonder if maybe the easiest solution would be to continue this semicircle shape right here and just presume that it's going to continue to wrap around and like fill in this, and that way we have less sky that we need to deal with, and that way we can copy over more of that rock texture like this. And then we have like this semicircle here. We've got these circles here. And again, just thinking about it in terms of a more abstract composition than thinking about like realistically what might be happening outside of the frame. Does that make sense?
Yeah, speaking about value, I was kind of scared of putting more like dark values outside of the focal point.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of just made them less dark, a little bit lighter.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'll try to balance it in the next painting.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a really, I think the composition here has some really strong elements going for it. And I think you did a good job overall. Do you have any questions for me while I've got you here on stage?
I was actually I actually wanted to ask about you. You mentioned spending a lot of time on one painting,
Hmm.
like no time limit. And I wanted to do this, but I'm not sure if this is kind of a study painting or if this is fully imaginative. How should I approach this?
It's whatever you want to grow better at. I think that the first step to growing better at it is to see how far you can go in terms of quality with no time limit. That was a thing. That was a strategy that I used early on with my imaginative painting to get better very fast during my college years. Was to presume that I had an unlimited budget of time, and that I would go and do everything the hard way, and see how far I could go if I just always pushed forwards. See how far it would go before I ran out of things I could do to make it better. And it turned
Mhm.
out that a simple character portrait took me about 45 hours to do. And it felt like a lot, but I was so happy with the results. And that set a bar for me to keep trying to meet. And then it wasn't that long before I could produce similar results in far less time, like 10 hours, less than. Um, and I've seen people do the same thing with atelier style learning, doing cast studies. I've known people who did very intensive academic study, and one of the first assignments they would get is to spend 100 hours manually rendering a pencil drawing of a bust, and just doing it centimeter by centimeter in graphite on paper from like a plaster bust, and it was like minimum 100 hours of rendering. And those people got really good technically. They were able to get their technical skills very, very far, very over a short period of time through this intense, pursuit of technical perfection by just taking the limit off of the time. The studies we're doing here are not really intended to be that level of intensity because we're turning them around in a week. We have a lot else going on in our lives. I just want to make sure that information is available to people so that they know if you want to push your technical skills further. It's like everyone's always trying to figure out how to go faster, faster, faster. I think that slowing down and being meticulous and being very careful about every choice that you make. I think that learning how far that process goes is something that we all need to do at some point. And it's something I want to make sure people are aware of. But yeah, there's no pressure to do that for these kinds of assignments. This is more for fun and extra along with whatever else you're doing.
I see. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you. Thanks for doing the homework, and I appreciate seeing you around here every week. All right, next up we've got Sean Gillespie. Sean's here in the chat. Hey, Sean, how's it going? You are muted. There you go.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How about you?
Not too bad.
You have one of the most inventive studies this week. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. Well, I probably should have stuck more closely to the reference because I don't have any of those like textures. I feel like I probably could have gone deeper on the texture of the rock. But yeah, I just wanted to tried to get movement into the rock because I remember you mentioning before how like clouds and trees and rocks are like really slow explosions. So I tried to get movement into those sorts of things
Yes.
and tried to use them as graphical elements. So
Oh,
I tried to get some
I'm
depth
happy
as
you
well.
remembered that. I was actually trying to write out a bunch more assignments like this to prepare, and one of them was I was going to give people a reference for explosions, and I was going to ask them to paint it as trees to try to get this point across.
Yeah, that was kind of what I
But
had in mind. Yeah.
yes, this is an excellent example of that. In this reference, we can clearly see one of the things that's so compelling about this particular rock formation is how energetic it is. despite the fact that it doesn't seem to be moving very quickly at all, there is quite a bit of movement to it. There's a gesture to these rocks. This arch here is very dynamic, and we see lots of lines sort of running parallel. We see the streaks running down the sides that are giving a sense of motion. We see the way that the wear patterns on the rocks are going, the large shapes of the rocks. They all have a motion and a direction to them. Even these rocks that have crumbled down here, you can imagine these falling down and settling in their final positions. They didn't just appear there. They are a product of the forces which acted upon them. And by considering those forces and thinking about them in motion, we get the ability to bring in some of that like sense of history and dynamic action to a scene which is totally motionless, which I think is very cool. And I think that when people strive for that, it shows up in the work, and it's the difference between, very static, very boring environmental art and very fun, exciting to look at environment art. And it's something I always try to consider whenever I'm doing this. I found people have a lot of fun thinking about this sort of thing when they're doing their own.
Yeah, I agree. Trying to get that flow between different elements to look like they're moving from one through the other. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I succeeded in getting it across the whole image. I tried to get it into the different parts at least.
Yeah,
and I have a confession as well. I stole one of your paintings for reference to one of the. Is it Turiel? I'm not sure. I can't remember now.
Turiel, the Angel of the Mountain.
Yeah. The one where he's inside. The first one where he's inside.
Inside the cave.
I used it a little bit on those rocks. Yeah.
Well, you've done one of the things I recommended before, which is, hey, if you feel like there's not enough motion in the sky behind your environment, throw some clouds in there and give them some nice streaky shapes. You have these all kind of running in line to show a little bit of perspective. But in addition to creating a sort of sensible perspective, we're also getting a sense of motion. These clouds have like zoom lines behind them, like they're cartoon characters running away, which gives it a sense of, dynamic action. Even though we know, looking at this, the clouds are not flying at 100 miles an hour through the sky. They are slowly, progressively floating. But they are being acted on by the wind, and we are seeing them through these converging lines of perspective, and so we get these very exciting lines of action. I think that to upgrade this even more, I think what I would recommend is that you look for opportunities of overlap. Having clouds that don't touch the edge of the thing that's behind them seems a little specific and peculiar. Might be a good choice for a surrealist image that's intentionally trying to create a sense of oddness. But if you wanted to have it feel energetic and more like fantasy art, I would definitely look for an opportunity to overlap and show where you have some of these streaks coming out from behind the rocks.
I agree.
And I would also, because you have space across the whole sky here, I would use the whole sky to do this, and you can even have these lines continue to fan out and carry on, across the whole thing. And so you have the opportunity to bring more of them along the right-hand side here, and show that fan pattern, just continue it along the whole way. And it doesn't take much to continue to bring out the strong points of this composition and draw us into the center point. You have this. These lines are all kind of pointing towards the middle through the arch, which I think gives us an excellent focal point. But falling off the cliff's edge over here into an empty sky with no horizon does look a little strange, like we're on a floating island. But, if we were on a floating island, I might want to see a horizon line still, where we see a sea of clouds below it, or if it's just high up in the air, we might still get a fuzzy bit of horizon in the background somewhere. Without a horizon line, it does come off a little strange.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to do that with the clouds, but I I couldn't figure out how to do that and the movement. I thought it was like conflicting. But yeah, I agree.
I think different parts of the clouds are capable of like doing different jobs.
That's true. They're clouds. They can do whatever they want.
Acid Fiend on Twitch, I forgot what the name of Twitch for a second, was asking, hey, how do you do the homework thing? Is it for subs? No, it's free. Just come to the Discord, and I just pick randomly from the submissions in the homework channel every week, and you can get your stuff reviewed. I could do it for subs. I could charge like I just prefer to do it for free. Make it more available to everybody. All right. That's my big feedback for this. I think this is the start of a beautiful painting. Do you have any questions for me? I'd love to answer anything you have on your mind.
I wonder if I've some parts are too repetitive. Does that come across the trees or something?
Too repetitive.
I found it hard to get variation.
I don't think it's a matter of repetitive, but the thing I would say about the trees is that when you have sparse cover, when you have like sparse elements like this, you're best off grouping them rather than having them as individual separate elements. So right now you have tree as like tree, 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 and they're all kind of evenly spaced from each other. And then you have it a little bit over here where these are just barely kissing, just a little bit. I think that in the original reference, we saw several shrubs. We had more of a foreground that was closer to us, and we have several shrubs that are kind of mushing into each other and overlapping. In this case, what I would do is take some of these trees and have them sitting right on top of each other to make sure that we have like a few of them kind of clustering around, kind of like how people do when they're at a half-full party where they all break off in their little social groups and they kind of huddle together and whisper. Like, I think that's how the trees would look most natural, is sort of huddling together in groups, having conversation.
That's an interesting analogy. I'll keep that one in mind.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for
Thanks very much
this week. Awesome work.
Thank you. Amazing. Thanks.
All right. Miguel Firewolf. I know he's here. Miguel, are you here? There you are. We had a moment of pause there. Two little trees like making cute faces. Absolutely. Hey, Miguel, how's it going?
I'm fine, thank you, Peter, and you?
I'm doing very well. So you're saying you're liking landscapes more and more?
Yes, I'm start to fall in love with with the landscapes now.
I don't know. I've seen a lot of landscapes. I mean, you've done the assignments, but I feel like your landscapes are catching my attention more and more.
Oh, thank you.
You know, I find it's very common that when somebody really starts to enjoy one thing in particular, I find myself also liking that work from them quite a bit more. And it's always encouraging. We want to live in a world where the stuff that we love doing the most is also the stuff that people want from us, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so, yeah, we do live in that world, I think. And it's why I always encourage people to follow the work that they care most about, because the question is always, how do I succeed? How do I get people to notice me? You know, and it's like, you need to give up on trying to please other people and find what makes you happy in art. Everybody says that.
Yeah.
And yet it is such hard advice to follow. But when you start getting that sense of like, wow, I really love doing this, I want to keep going, I always want to take time to encourage somebody to follow that feeling because it's so productive.
Yes, and it's something I really feel really well with that. From this, I think is the 18 week now, and from the first one to now, when we do the assignments with the landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
Each time that we do the assignment for landscape, I start to feel more how to say it, excited with the study, and yes, this time I really feel relaxing doing this one. Mm-hmm. And I think more because the texture of the rocks.
Mm-hmm. So I have a bit of feedback for you here. Are you prepared?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
I think that the texture is really pronounced. I think it's very good. The thing that I am not getting as much of a sense of is the light. I feel like the material looks very like chalky. Like we're not seeing. I don't feel like we're seeing reflections. I don't feel like we're seeing light bouncing around in the scene quite as much as I think is possible. And some of that can be it can all be painted manually. I mean, you can do this in acrylic paint without having to do a lot of glazing and blending modes or anything like that. But we're working digitally, and so we have the opportunity to use something like a blending mode. And this is one of the cases where I find myself correcting my work midstream quite a lot, where whenever it starts to feel a little flat and I want to bring out more of a sense of a glow. Right now I have a blending mode for soft light, and I've grabbed one of the bright tan colors here, something that's got a little bit of orange in it. And I am just using the soft brush to throw a bunch of that inside the shadow area. When I turn it on and off, you can see it's almost like I'm turning a light on and off. And this is the reflected light that's bouncing up from the ground here and illuminating inside the shadow. That illumination tends to not be totally even. And so I think that applying it with a soft brush like this gives a little bit of a sense of that glowiness. But we don't want so much glowiness it looks like a cheap effect. It might be a little too much. See, overlay, we start to get a little too much. Let's see. Color, color dodge. It's like now it looks gross. It looks terrible. But I like soft light for this quite a bit to make these kinds of subtle adjustments. And then sometimes I will even turn them down a little bit from here, just to make sure it's a little subtle adjustment that I can build on top of later. And you can do the opposite as well. You can grab one of the darker colors and maybe vignette around the edges a little bit. And hard light will bring in some of the saturation, but this is me just painting in black. I'm just painting black in at pretty high opacity with the soft brush. And so you can see how I can kind of reshape it a little bit. And the same thing.
And now I see the contrast that you mentioned with the light.
Yes. And it's one of those things like you can hear that and go, well, I am adding the bounce light. It would be fully black if there was no bounce light. What is he even talking about? And then you see it and you go, oh, wait. Yeah, you can definitely.
Now subtle. I know.
It's a subtle change that happens over the length of it. And then, this can also be true across like even at the ground. Like there's a hot spot where we're going to see we're seeing we're setting up a stage here, and we're focusing in on the central area by vignetting a little bit and bringing down some of the contrast on the areas on the edges. We have the opportunity to bring attention towards the middle a little bit, and this is pretty broadly true inside the reference. There are
on the reference, the color on the ground.
Yeah.
On the shadow is more cooler, like red, blue, bluish.
Yes.
I think it's cooler.
There's a little bit more of a purple color down here, and then more of an orange color up here. And the difference between them creates a bit of sense of direction to these shapes.
That's correct.
And then what I'm saying is, like, if we look at the ground here, you can see that the direction that we're like across this way, very, very bright highlights. And then as we go across to the right, it actually starts to darken a little bit. And so we lose a little bit of that. And this gives us focus. We have this path that leads up and through here. And so I want to try to recreate that a little bit by darkening a little bit on the sides to bring in that that focus up this frontal path here. And so just a little bit of I'm just looking at the navigator to tell whether or not the
thumbnail
are correct.
Yeah.
It is one of those things where if it's and I'm adding a little bit of purple in here at your recommendation. It might be a little too much, but it's one of those things where it's going to look, if it looks right up here, it's right, and it's never going to come down to the individual marks. There are these broader, looser marks that I try to get as many of them in early as possible, because it's sometimes dangerous to go in late in a painting. You've done all of this work, you've added all this detail, and now you're trying to put glazes over the top of it to pull it all together. It's scary. So, it's important to try to make sure that you're getting these elements established as clearly as possible, as early as possible, so that you don't end up feeling that, that sense that you're trying to fix the thing that you already spent 10 hours on. It's bad. It's a bad feeling.
Yes, but you are right. It's something that maybe I didn't notice on the moment that I do it.
Mm-hmm.
But you have right. It's just to put attention on the shadows and the lights, and see that contrast color that comes from from warm, and from a shadow that is cooler color.
Yeah, and let me just I want to make a visual representation of it here. Let's just look at this. I'm trying to think about the image like this, right? And we really get to see clearly like these gradations, the broader gradations in the composition. And so the goal is to train our eyes so that we see things through this lens as we're working. And you can see the more orangey bits over here in the corner, and how it's like a little bit darker off to this side, and it gets brighter up through here. That this is all a little bit more clear. And so trying to figure out where these larger gradations are in the composition is something I've always been concerned about at the beginning, because it's easy to lay this out in broad strokes very loose early on. And then it's very hard to lay those loose strokes in at the top and not screw up all your details at the end. So considering this at the beginning and building the texture on top of those looser marks will get you this feeling much more naturally without having to take extra passes to do things like glazes at the end.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much for that feedback, Peter.
Great. I'm glad I had some feedback for you this week. Any questions before I let you go?
No, I think no. This time it's something I didn't notice, but is really helpful.
All right, fantastic. I always like to surprise people with a crit that's they didn't realize.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you, Miguel. All right. Next up, we've got Lexon. Lexon saying, "I learned so much. I don't know. Lexon is maybe new around here. I don't see Lexon in the Ovid. Oh wait, no, yeah, I do. I always say that, and then Lexon, if you want to come up and chit chat about your work, feel free to raise your hand. If you don't want to or can't, you don't have to. Hey, Lexon, you are muted at the moment. You gotta unmute yourself first.
Oh, sorry. Hey, how are you doing?
Hey there. It's muted by default. Catches everybody. How was your experience working on the assignment this week?
Pretty good. I'm not really used to environments, so this was kind of new for me.
Oh, yeah?
And I would say, like, a lot of the stuff you already gave critiques really did help me beforehand. Good. So,
well, I see a lot of the things that we've talked about today being done very well. And one of the things that strikes me about your piece is that it feels very much like the original. Like, I feel like you captured quite a bit of the original essence of the composition while dramatically changing the proportions of it. What was your experience like trying to solve that problem?
I know when I started drawing it, I thought of, I think the dolly zoom from, like, you know, movies and stuff like that. So I took that into reference and I used that as an idea. Like, for example, I moved the perspective closer to the ground and tried to raise that up. So it looked like it was kind of overarching. So that was what I started with.
Nice. Yeah, you preserved the original, like the shape of the central hole quite a bit, while adding, you did a little bit of outfill over here, and then the bushes, like you have all this, that leaves a lot of space over here that's empty rock, but instead of leaving it open, you just pushed a bush in front of it. And you're like, that looks like it's hard to paint. Let's just get a bush in the way, and then I don't need to paint it anymore. Which I got to tell you is like totally valid. Like that's actually good thinking. You did the same on the right side too. We've got these bushes that are up here that are a little bit further away from the camera. But when you, like you said, change the framing of it a little bit, change the lens distance a little bit, we get the ability to like push the foreground closer, and that solves some of the compositional questions where it's like, well, what's outside this frame? It's like, yeah, we know there's some rocks behind here, but we don't need to paint the rocks because there's a bush in front of it. So problem solved. It's very clever.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Thank you.
I hadn't thought of it. I was just trying to draw more rocks. What would you say is your biggest struggle with it this week?
Oh yeah, that was the dead space. Like you see, I try to hide it with bushes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know another one is, for example, if you look at where the people are, I have a lot of just flat color.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing if you see on the right and the left side. Like I've started from like the middle out, so you can see like the more we get out from the main focus, the less detailed it gets. Because I tried to keep within that time frame. Oh, sorry.
That's good though. That's smart. That's working smart.
Oh, thank you. But then I'll think on the other ones that you showed, you said about the perspective lines on the rocks. Like I noticed that as I was drawing it, I was like, oh, the lines are kind of acting as the perspective lines. And then I think I tried to add that in more and more.
Yes.
And then I think one thing I should have done is I saw you were talking to the other guy about the clouds, because the top left is kind of just dead space.
Kind of empty.
I should have kind of added some clouds there.
Yeah, that's an option. I don't actually. The thing is like the better I got at painting, the more I felt like I should fill every darn inch of it with more stuff, and then I've actually started to slide backwards on that. There is definitely an impulse in digital art to fill every inch with detail and attention and more stuff. Rest areas in paintings are good. And I think that this nice soft gradient in the background suits this piece well. And I think that because you have a lot of the other elements balanced out nicely, I don't think that the empty space in the sky is necessarily a problem with the way that you've laid this out. My biggest criticisms, I've got two big criticisms for you, though. One of them is it seems like you're less experienced with your mark making. We've got some, there's very little blending going on in the gradient of the sky back here. And in the rocks as well, we're getting very large blocky marks. The overall look of it is quite excellent, but the texture and detail of it is a little bit flat. So I'm wondering if there's anything I can help elucidate about like making these kind of marks to help you, make this feel a little bit more natural. What program?
Oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I completely slipped my mind. But yeah, because I was trying to figure out how to create a more finished look. Because like you said, while it does look all right, it looks, like you said, unfinished, because the rocks, you can't really tell that it, like the texture. That's the word.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the sky in specific, because this is a really simple shape, and so it's easy for us to say that there's like a, it'd be nice to have some of this banding go away. So, what program are you working in?
Photoshop.
Working in Photoshop. Okay. So you're working with a pretty heavy brush. Have you played around with the brush settings a lot?
No, I usually kind of use just one brush and that's it.
Okay. Well, one brush is fine. I've done most of my work with just a single brush also. But the brush that I'm using, and people are probably sick of hearing about it by this point, I turn my flow down to 10%. And what that does is it makes it so that the brush strokes trail off, so that the ends of them are softened. And that means that if, like, you've got all of your marks running like this way, running parallel to each other, right? if you were to go back over it one more time without even having to do much, just selecting the color with the Alt key and then running brush strokes perpendicular to these marks like this, and just stitch them up. You can, even without having to use a soft brush and without having to use a gradient, you can manually brush out a gradient without spending a million years on it. Even with me doing, this is probably the most manual, most tedious way of doing this. And even with that, you can see we can smooth out a lot of this gradient in just a few seconds. It's not a big project at all. Typically, when I'm doing this, I try to get a big gradient like this in the composition as early as possible using something like a soft brush. That way I don't need to be worried about being precise about it, and just get it in as early as possible. Just try to scrub something in, and like one of the things I'll do is I'll make like a gradient and I'll do it on a separate layer like this. And then I will go in and erase out off that layer to scrape away all the unnecessary material over the top of the rocks. So even without getting very picky about layers or whatever, you can actually lay in a gradient like that and then peel away all the unnecessary stuff. Like it's something you can even do traditionally, but you got to like lay down masking fluid or tape or something over the top of it. But people do this all the time traditionally as well. So,
okay, that's good because I never thought of that.
Great. I do this all the time with any kind of like soft effects. Like if I'm doing like let's say we were trying to add in like a little bit of dust over here. I'm gonna bring up something like a cloudy, and I'm gonna bring up a nice bright color. And I wanted some dust coming from over the horizon there. I could do something like this. And just go, this is obviously looks bad, right? It's just covering everything. But we can either use a mask or we can just use the eraser tool. With the mask, I'm just going to paint black, and it's going to erase out the parts that we don't want. And then I can have it just appear over the edge like this. And so instead of trying to like make everything precise, starting off imprecise and then clipping it back to just the necessary bits tends to be a lot faster than trying to get it in one go.
Okay.
So that's using the mask. The mask is just down there at the bottom of the layer tab. It's like a square with a circle cut out of it. And so whenever you paint white, it will reveal what is on that layer, and whenever you paint black, it'll hide what's on that layer. And so it's like a controllable erase tool that allows you to very easily add in an effect and then limit it to just the parts on the composition where you want it. And then I don't really try to preserve all this to the end. I'll just like put that on, and then I'll just like make a new layer and just keep painting over the top of it or whatever, you know. But as far as like making sure you got a nice crisp edge on an effect like that, you can do it pretty quick. So with the rock texture and stuff, I usually use a brush that behaves just like my round brush, but I have one that's like a square and it's got a textured edge on it. And that way, when I'm doing the same amount of rendering and stuff, I get a certain amount of texture that sort of naturally appears. I know a lot of the textured brushes that you see around in brush packs and in default on Photoshop, they tend to have a bit of, they tend to just sort of like stamp like a whole area with texture. I want something that has a little bit of size flow on it so I have control. So light pressure gives it a little bit, and then heavy pressure will cover over a lot more. And then going through, just doing the same exact painting technique that you're doing right now, when you do that with a textured brush like this, you're going to get a little bit of a textured transition between your lighter and darker areas, and that's going to look pretty good. And then if you wanted to, say, muddy up a whole area, you can go and just turn the opacity down and just kind of like splash a little bit of extra texture on there. And you can really quickly and automatically fill in areas of texture just to get a base that you can go back in and work into a little bit more. You know, even back just bringing out your round brush again later, you can get a lot out of that. And then, okay, so the two things, I said there was two things. That was one thing. That was just the brushwork. I want to make sure you knew what your options were. The other thing is the color. I think that the values you've got going on here are very good, but the colors are looking a little dull. You'd seen my suggestion earlier about using like a soft light and then using that to bring in a little bit of bounce lighting inside the shadows here. That's something that might work. And you can see once we start using I've changed the blending mode of the layer from normal is the default. I've changed it to soft light here, which allows us to add in a little bit of extra color and saturation, as well as, just lean on the values a little bit. And so we're able to get a little bit of a sense of a glow like that. It's quite easy. And so that's one thing you can do if you want to have a spot area and start to bring in some additional saturation into like your shadows. That could work. The other thing you can do is you can use a adjustment layer. Selective color is a really powerful one that's exclusive to Photoshop. You can color balance. This is, I think, a good situation for color balance. So you can, choose to balance your. If you feel like your shadows are coming in a little bit too dull, that probably in this situation it looks like you might have a little too much cyan in your shadows. So what we're going to do here is bring up a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow into your shadows, just to add some orange to the whole scene overall. You can see that that's starting to give it more of that high desert look. The other thing I like to do is I'm about to release a pack of 50 gradient maps because I just made a whole bunch of new ones. I like to take a gradient map and change its blending mode, and then it'll work as a kind of color grading tool, and we can get all kinds of cool colors here. And then you can just sort of flip through them. You can see all kinds of like interesting color effects that happen, different gradient maps. And then, you might like one and you just want to turn it down a little bit. And it's got a mask built in, so we can mask off an area with a gradient like this and start to bring in a little bit of extra color. It's a lot of options, a lot of control. Any question? I'm throwing a lot at you right now. So I'm wondering, is there anything from the technical side of things I could slow down and explain a little bit more clearly?
No, those maps were pretty good. Like they helped a lot with the dust, and I think I saw the chat going crazy. But yeah, the dust was that you showed me was really cool.
All right, cool.
And the gradient maps, that's something I'm gonna have to take a look at.
Yeah, these adjustment layers, whether you're using a gradient map is a favorite of mine that I use quite a bit, but I've got a friend who's super good at art who just absolutely loves selective color as a tool for solving these kinds of problems, because you can select like the blacks or the neutrals or the whites and just be like, okay, just the darker colors. Let's see what happens if we, tune the amount of the mixture of colors just in the shadows. And you can see any tool that allows you to make something really ugly and broken like this is a good tool, because if it can go too far, then it can go not far enough. You can always dial it in however you want it. If it's able to screw things up that bad, then you can find a good balance for it. Or with selective color, you can even say like, well, let's just look at our yellows. That way it's not going to touch the sky color. I'll probably just recolor the lighting here. And you can see how it can tilt just the yellow areas of the painting to bring in a little bit more red, bring up the yellow, or we can even turn down the yellow a little bit. And now we got this sort of dusty red going through here. We turn it on and off. Just a little bit of adjustment there. There's a lot of room to play with the colors after the fact. And because it's a layer that lives in your layer stack, you can just paint on top of it from here. I typically just will throw on an adjustment layer like this. It's nicer to do this than to adjust the whole painting. By just because it's non-destructive, you can go back and undo it. You can go back and change your parameters at any time, and continue to fiddle with it as much as is comfortable for you. And then once you've got it dialed in, then you can just make a new layer and start painting on top of it again. And it's easy to just keep pushing forwards and keep adding more new layers of detail and do whatever you're going to do. So if you ever start to feel like, oh, this is coming together, but I want to mess with the colors a little bit, you got a lot of opportunities in Photoshop. Okay, so that was a lot. Any questions? I'm sure
No, that was everything.
Okay, that's all art. All right, great. You're off to an awesome. I mean, you're. I really like the composition of your study this week, and I think you start incorporating a few more techniques in here, I think it's going to look really solid, man.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for working on the homework. It's great seeing your stuff. I'm going to kick you off the stage. And then we got one last one for today. We're running over time. I was worried I wasn't going to pull enough, and then I pulled too many. Delia, how you doing? You here? Hey, Delia.
Of course I am.
Hey, I don't know. Maybe you're on vacation. I pulled
No,
yours,
I know.
I pulled yours first. These end up getting in reverse order from when I pulled them. I was like, oh, no, I don't know. I'm running last minute. I'll just pull Delia's. And now we're over time, and you're up on stage. Any quick questions?
That's okay.
What's your thoughts?
Well, I guess, I think that when I was looking at other people's work when they expanded the rocks, I think my imagination of rocks isn't as great as I'd like it to be. Like on the right side, I kind of just kept everything to be like pretty much on one plane.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to figure out how to stylize rocks more, like kind of what I've been doing so far with my landscapes, like making cool plants and clouds and rocks. I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like,
yeah, you've been building this stylized language, but this week feels a little bit more like you're returning back to painting. Like I see a lot of soft brush buried in there, and then you've got textured brushes layered over the top. You're throwing a lot of different brushes. You're throwing a lot of different blending modes at it. You don't seem as comfortable as some of the past weeks.
No. So I was kind of curious about them. Like I don't know if that's just me needing to just try out more stuff.
Yeah.
But
all right. Knowing you, I'm going to give a recommendation here.
Okay.
I really like when you reduce the number of colors that you use, and you focus on like the shapes of like blocks of color and value. You have a great eye for it. And when you go to simplify things, like it starts to magic starts to happen. And what feels like is happening here is you're adding all these layers of complexity, and I think it's overriding your better choices. I think it's not a matter of finding something that's like an abstract shape that like suggests a rock. I think that you looking at the patterns of light and shadow from a more of a posterized perspective, bringing those in, making them clear, making them read, and then just like going from there. There are some good moments in this original reference image that are like excellent for that sort of thing. There is such a clear definition between the lit area and the shadowed area. And you have like these textures here where we have like these diagonal slats that are running parallel. If you were to make this into a 2-color thing with a little bit of texture behind, like, different texture treatment on the lit area versus the shadowed area, you're in Gravy Town. You're in your comfort zone, right? And finding the shapes of these individual rocks and like that, again, we have like a shape language for the light and shadow here, something that you are very good at and have made look excellent in other landscape stuff in the past. And we're not seeing it in this painting. And I think that if you are feeling lost or struggling, I think it's because you're moving away from your strengths in this painting.
Yeah.
Because like now that I've seen you do certain things, I know that like a moment like this is a moment where Delia can absolutely carve it up and, make something beautiful. So the fact that you're not carving into these and making these very specific crisp edges and like finding that shape language, it's like, it's not a mystery to me why it's feeling a little mushy.
That makes sense.
And, you want to like, I think you want to stylize it. I think you got to bring it back to like looking at those edges, looking at like those transitions and creating that interesting pattern that arises from that and really focusing in on a visual aspect of the environment that you're seeing right in front of you. Those bits, I know they call to you, and you can see them. Just let that lead you and see where that goes. I think you doing it would probably be better than me doing it. in this, if you were to take this approach. I feel like this sort of stuff is easy mode for you. And
it should have been, but
it should have been. But like, you're like, how do I stylize rocks? You don't need to worry. That's not the question. You need to just see the reference from the perspective that is consistently works for you. Look for those moments that call to you. Do those, and then once you have that on the page, then ask yourself, what does this need? And you will find those answers organically by following your taste and, just trusting that the things that you're good at, that stand out to you, that will carry you to some place where you're going to go make an interesting decision. But like when you leave that stuff behind, then you're just lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having a foothold like that is so powerful. And now that you've found that, like, I want you to just you're going to have plenty of room for experiments. You don't need to leave that behind in order to discover and learn new things. There is so much within that framework to continue to explore and build on, especially with you doing studies, learning all kinds of different subject matters, getting exposure to like, okay, well, now I'm going to be doing more rocks. I haven't done a lot of rocks before. You're still learning. You're still growing. You don't need to leave behind your comfort zone in order to continue to learn and grow and build on what you've already learned.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
good.
I think that's good advice to get my head in the game, I guess, again.
that insecurity of like wanting to like, okay, I don't want to do it easy. I want to do it hard. I want to learn. I want to go better. It's like, I think this is something that catches a lot of people. I don't know if that's necessarily what's happened to you this week, but like I see that a lot, and I just want to call it out, make sure that, whenever you're doing something like this, just like do it on easy mode every time. I swear you are going to find interesting opportunities and learn stuff every single time, even if you try to make it the easiest, dumbest painting you possibly can.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Any questions, thoughts?
No, that was great to hear. Thank you.
Good. Well, it's always great to see your work around here. Good talking with you.
Yes.
And then I'm going to open up the floor last minute here. Does anybody have any last minute questions? Anything you want to hit me up with? We're 15 minutes over on time, but we stumbled a little at the start, so I'm happy to take any questions last minute. Otherwise, I'm going to let you guys go. See, Larrabee is typing. Larrabee's not typing anymore. Larrabee's typing again. Homework. Yes. Oh, God. Yeah, I screwed that up. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to post the homework image in here. I'm going to post it in the homework channel also. Pull it up inside the Photoshop. This is the reference image for this week. We got a bird. Some of you guys gonna freak out. Love bird. I know, wife love bird. It's a great bird shot that Dustin found for us on the reference. I'm posting it in the homework chat. What I want you to do, I was thinking, what can we do to spice things up a little bit? And we've done a lot of painting. That is me. I'm Mr. Painting every time. There's something I'm really bad at that I think some of you are probably excellent at, and I want you to have an opportunity to flex your muscles on it. I want you this week to do this piece in line art with flat colors. So do a line version of it, black and white line drawing, and then I want you to finish it with just some flat colors with the lines. You can do color hold on the lines if you want. You can try to make it fancy, stylize it, but I want lines with flats because lines with flats can just be gorgeous. And I've known so many artists that beat themselves up over not rendering enough, not painting enough, when all the world ever wants from them is more lines with flats. So I'm going to type this out in homework really quick. Any questions about the homework? Let me just go back into the chat real quick here. Any questions about the homework? Rodriguez. So some people, line art, they're like, hell yeah, this is my time to shine. And then other people, cell shading, okay, you can throw in some cell shading if you want. I am really focused on lines with flats. It's a line drawing, and then you just need some flats to like give it a sense of volume, give it a sense of color. Lines with flats. So no shading. Just, you want to throw a gradient, a little texture on there, try to spice things up. You guys always love to try to go extra on stuff. I'm not going to tell you you can't go extra, but this is not a rendering thing. Line art, it's hard. Some people love it. If maybe you are somebody who secretly could love line art and you've never given yourself enough permission to do it, and this is the opportunity, I want to keep giving you guys diverse assignments to introduce you to all the things that you could be doing with your work. Maybe you will discover that you love. It's your comfort zone. Excellent. Lines with flats. The bird will be hard because I can't draw animals well. Again, good because it's a challenge. I want to throw some animals at you guys every once in a while. People, animals, environments, the whole thing. And if there's no more questions, I'm going to let you all go. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a lovely experience having you here with me every single week. I appreciate everyone who takes so much effort out of their week every week to go do the homework for this free class, even though there's no good reason to do it. You're the best. I will see you again next week, Thursday, the usual time. Have a good one, everyone. Have a good night. Bye-bye.